I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is this House do now adjourn. Mr Stephen Mosley.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm delighted to open this evening's adjournment debate on the funding of basketball in the UK, and I'd like to begin by declaring my interest as a chairman of the British Basketball League Foundation, a not-for-profit organisation who coordinate and deliver national community basketball programmes. The catalyst for requesting this debate was a recent decision by UK Sport to cut basketball's funding for the Rio 2016 Olympic Games to zero. However, I also want to demonstrate how basketball as a sport is hugely underfunded in the UK. In terms of grassroots participation, basketball is incredibly popular. In the most recent Active People survey conducted by Sport England, it was estimated that just short of 153,000 people play basketball at least once a week in the UK. Basketball is the fifth most popular played team sport in the country and the second highest sport amongst 11 to 15-year-olds. The figures show that in the key 16 to 25 target area, where participation rates in all sports drop off the fastest, basketball holds on to the highest levels of interest of all team sports. Equally important is the demographic makeup of the sport's participants. Over 40% of the 153,000 weekly players are from black and minority ethnic groups.
Well, my honourable friend give way.
Of course I'll give way.
Does my honourable friend recognise that also this is principally takes place in the urban conurbations, which is incredibly important because we need to get young people to actually play sport?
You are quite correct. Basketball is mainly played in those urban areas, and in fact amongst the lowest socio-economic groups in the country, basketball is the most popular sport.
And does he also recognise that the Plymouth Raiders is one of the principal basketball teams in the whole of this country, does very well, and that is based in my Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport constituency?
The Plymouth Raiders are an excellent basketball team. And looking around the chamber, I can see representatives from Leicester, from Newcastle, from Cheshire, of course. So basketball is well represented here this evening. Participation levels in basketball are very good, but we should be doing all that we can to make sure that they're exceptional. Of course I'll give way.
I'm extremely grateful to the honourable gentleman. And just before he moves off from this part of his speech, he talked about the basketball's popularity amongst the black and minority ethnic community. That is quite right. The honourable gentleman from Plymouth has talked about urban areas. So, as you would expect, basketball is incredibly popular in Leicester, where we have the excellent Leicester Riders. And they've been telling me in recent days that this decision to cut back the funding is absolutely wrong, and I hope the Minister listens to the representations this evening and announces a U-turn.
The Minister will be replying shortly, but I know that all of us in this chamber will be looking at him with expectant eyes and hoping he will be able to help us. One would assume that with so many people playing basketball, particularly given the demographic makeup of the sport's participants, that Sport England would be backing basketball with all their might. However, sadly, that assumption is misplaced. In the past month or so, when confronted about the decision to cut funding for the Olympics team to zero, the Minister has been keen to stress that England basketball has received a substantial sum from Sport England to support the grassroots game and to support talent development. For the coming 4 years, Sport England has allocated £6.8 million for community programmes and the development of talent through the youth ranks. That does sound like a lot of money. However, the best way to understand it is to break that figure down into a per-person funding total. Based upon Sport England's own statistics, that means just £12 per player per year for each player who plays once a week. And whilst it's not my intention to pit sport against sport, the only fair way of judging that figure is by comparing it with Sport England's funding of other sports. Take hockey, for example, which has 109,000 weekly participants. They will be receiving £12 million over the same 4 years, or by the same formula, £28 a year per player, more than twice the amount allocated to basketball. Or netball, which has 159,000 weekly participants. They will be receiving £25 million, or £39 a year per player. more than 3 times the amount allocated to basketball. And finally, Rugby League, 51,000 weekly participants, £17.5 million funding, £86 a year per player, 7 times the amount allocated to basketball. Given that basketball is the most popular team sport amongst BME and lower socio-economic groups, and given that it carries the most interest amongst Sport England's key 16 to 25-year-old market, it seems incredible that such a relatively small funding is available from Sport England. If the game is... Of course I'll give way.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. He's making a very compelling argument about the funding, but I also wanted to see if he agreed with me that it's not just the 16 to 25-year-olds and beyond that benefit from investment in this sport, but also children through the Hoops for Health programme, which is having a massive impact on school children and getting very young children interested in basketball as a sport from a very young age and teaching them about healthy lifestyles, anti-smoking and other health benefits of sport.
The Honourable Member is totally correct. Because basketball is so easy to play, it can be played anywhere, any bit of tarmac, people can play on it. It is very popular amongst young kids, the second most played sport amongst 11 to 15-year-olds, I think the statistic is. It's very easy to do, kids want to do it, and the basketball teams across the country have got a very, very good reputation at going out there, encouraging people to get involved, and trying to target those people who wouldn't necessarily get involved in sport other than basketball. If the game is to prosper in future, though, which it has the potential to do, I do believe that a fairer funding settlement needs to be agreed, and I would urge a minister to meet with representatives of Sport England to discuss the inherent inequality of their decisions, and I'd be most grateful on his thoughts on whether £12 a year per player is indeed a fair settlement for basketball. But whilst funding at grassroots level is integral to any sport's long-term success, of equal importance is the structure and the funding of the elite game. In December, UK Sport announced its funding allocation for the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. After receiving £8.6 million for London 2012, the GB team has not been allocated a single penny for Rio. After making incredible progress over the previous funding cycle, the rug has been pulled from underneath the British basketball team. Unless this decision is reversed, elite British basketball will once again have to start from scratch. Of course.
I thank my honourable member for giving way, and he's making very good points. I just wanted to see if he'd agreed with me that when I go to visit primary schools in my Newcastle constituency, the Hoops for Health programme is often spoken about with a great deal of praise and admiration and enthusiasm, as my honourable friend mentioned, but also the ability to see top-class players, such as play for Newcastle Super Eagles, in Newcastle is very important. And even more important, to be able to see them playing at the Olympics also helps inspire young people in my constituency and across the country.
You are totally right. Over the past 2 or 3 years, we've had some real world-class players come forward. Probably the best basketball player in the world at the moment is a Brit, and I'll be coming on to him later. Very simply...
Does my honourable friend recognise as well that one of the great things which we had last year was we had cage cricket which took place here, where Sir Ian Botham came in and actually showed us as to how sport he had our doing. That seems to be exactly the same kind of thing which we should be using, of taking small cages where we could end up by playing these games, especially in places like inner cities.
Again, the member is absolutely correct. At the moment, the basketball is running schemes where they're going about town centres, putting up temporary pitches and playing basketball there in the middle of the town. I understand, I'm looking at the chairman of the all-party parliamentary group here, I think in Trafalgar Square in the summer, people are going to be able to go down, do some hoops in the middle of Trafalgar Square. So it is something that basketball, shoot the hoops, is something that the basketball game is very conscious of, and it is a good way of getting young people involved and enthused by the sport. The problem that we've got is that UK sport funding is based upon what they consider to be the realistic chances of that each team has got of gaining a medal or a top 8 finish in Rio or in the 2020 Games.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. He's been very generous with his time. Isn't the real challenge, though, that the formula for deciding funding has been an overwhelming success, and therefore to change the formula might actually end up jeopardising some of the success that we've had in other sports?
My honourable friend makes a point. I can be fairly relaxed about taking interventions because I think I could be stood up here until 10 p.m. tonight, although I will reassure the Minister that I won't be taking quite that long. The funding, I myself have reservations about the process, and I also know that the Minister has recently made some comments. A couple of weeks ago in the Sunday Times, for instance, he did express some doubts at the way that the current funding works. Going for medal positions, going for the top 8 positions in the Olympics may not be the right way forward. And I think, was it the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago, the Minister did express some reservations about the process. Now, I don't want to argue against the whole process, that for all sports should be scrapped and the process restarted. However, what I intend to argue is that with the right funding, the Great Britain basketball team have every chance of a top 8 finish at Rio and even greater potential for success in 2020.
I thank the honourable member for giving way a second time. Would he agree with me that there may be some scope to look at team sports as opposed to individual sports slightly differently than the individual sports that currently get an awful lot of that funding?
Mosley, even. Mr Deputy Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The competitive situation of team games at the Olympics does tend to be a lot more difficult in terms of the number of people who are playing. Basketball, every country in the world plays basketball. Some of the more successful sports for the UK, you've got a more limited pool of participants. So maybe there are arguments for looking at team sports slightly different from individual sports. But the point I want to make today is that Great Britain basketball has got a fantastic opportunity in 2016 and in 2020. So I'd also like the Minister to answer how UK sport have assessed Great Britain's team's potential for success in Rio and beyond. Who was consulted during this assessment, and what were their reasons behind their conclusion?
Would my honourable friend recognise that Plymouth College, which I found out the other day, would be 49th as a country in getting the number of gold medals and Olympic medals as well, is actually very much willing to offer some of those state schools just outside the constituency or in my constituency, the opportunity to end up by using some of their people and their basketball people as well. And don't you think that is the kind of thing which we should be encouraging private schools to go off and help the state schools as well?
My honourable friend is quite correct. Basketball is a game that includes everybody, and the more people we can get involved, and by the sound of what he's saying about Plymouth College, they're doing a fantastic job to get people into the game, playing sport, which I'm sure is what we all want in this chamber this evening. But my argument when it comes to UK sport funding and their decision to remove funding from basketball is that their facts do not add up. Since UK sport funding for basketball was initiated, both the men's and the women's team have gone from the bottom rung of the international ladder to being some of the most respected teams in Europe. At London 2012, the men were just one basket away from achieving their UK sport quarter-final target. They recorded a historic 32-point win against China, who were ranked 10th in the world. They lost by just 1 point to eventual silver medalist Spain, and they almost beat Brazil, who finished 5th overall in the Olympics. These results were unthinkable just 4 years ago and demonstrate not only the huge progress that has been made, but also the potential for basketball in the future. In addition to their collective achievements, the number of individual star talents that exist within the GB team is growing all the time. Chicago Bulls superstar Lul Deng is one of the greatest sports stars in the world and one of the hugely successful British players currently plying their trade in the greatest league in the world, the NBA. He has written to the Prime Minister recently to protest against UK sports' decision, and I hope that the Minister has seen his letter. What message are we sending to young British basketball players who aspire to similar progress and similar greatness if we don't fund our national team? I give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, because he's coming on to the area which I think is really the crux of this matter, that if we are to encourage young people, whatever the sport is, we get to have a broad-based pyramid in order that you get the elite ones at the top. And unless there's that pyramid, then youngsters in particular, whether they be boys or girls, are not going to participate.
Again, another point which is totally cracked, and it's not just the men's team I'm talking about here, it's also the women's team and the youth team. The women's team was the youngest team at the Olympics, and they almost beat the silver medalist France, and were also narrowly defeated by fourth place Russia. This is stunning progress for a team that only came together a few years ago. And I also quickly want to mention the British youth men's team, who just last week won bronze at the Australian Youth Olympic Festival, demonstrating the strength that we have coming up in the UK in the pipeline. For UK sport to categorically state that neither adult team has any hope of medaling is hugely disappointing. It ignores the enormous progress that has been made over the previous 1.5 funding cycles, and it consigns British Olympic basketball to the scrap heap for the foreseeable future. I ask the Minister, how is the British national team expected to progress further to bid for future funding if UK sport are removing any chance of success in the short and the medium term? Furthermore, the Minister's recent assertion that the Great Britain basketball teams are unlikely to qualify for either Rio or the 2020 Games also looks to be wrong. Taking the men's team as an example, having qualified for the 2013 European Championships, and because they have risen significantly in the world rankings over the past 12 months, the GB team have avoided a number of the higher-ranked teams in the group stage draw, and they now have every chance of qualifying through to the next round. As a result, Rio qualification is a real possibility, and choosing to write them off at this stage would be a gross miscarriage of justice. I also understand that the Minister has expressed some concerns about the administration of the game and the ability of the governing body to deliver. To my knowledge, and to the knowledge of British performance basketball, there's never been any past criticism of their performance, of their structures, or of their business model. I'm sure that the Minister will appreciate the concern felt by British performance basketball. So before they make an official appeal to UK sport, they would be grateful to know if those comments were in fact directed at them, and if so, what have they done wrong, and what do they need to do to improve? I'd be very grateful if the Minister could cast some clarity on that important matter. Finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, I know that the Honourable Member for Washington and Sunderland West would like to make a brief contribution to this debate, and I hope that I've left sufficient time for her to do so. Hour and 40 minutes, that should be okay. But I would like to stress, as I'm sure that the Minister will appreciate, the breadth of these arguments warrant far more attention than a 30 minutes afforded to them in an adjournment debate. I hope that he will consent to meet representatives of British basketball as soon as possible so that they may gain some clarity on what exactly they need to do moving forwards. There are a lot of unanswered questions and a great deal of confusion surrounding these decisions. The whole of British basketball, the whole of the British basketball community would be very, very grateful for my right honourable friend's support in these coming crucial weeks ahead.
Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I must congratulate I feel I want to call him my friend, the Honourable Member for Chester for securing this very important debate. And we work together on the topic of basketball very closely. I'm chair of the all-party group for basketball, of which he's excellent vice chair, and I'm also one of the trustees on the board of which he chairs for the Basketball Foundation. I thank everyone else, other members of both sides who are also members of that fantastic all-party group for showing their commitment to this cause and being here in force tonight. I have to endorse everything that the Honourable Member has said so far, and I will seek, even though we've got the time available, not to repeat all of the many excellent points that he has made so far. But needless to say, I too am deeply disappointed by these decisions, both new and historic, that have led to this debate tonight. Basketball is so important, both in my constituency and across the country, because it reaches a demographic that few sports can. It is dynamic, accessible, and its natural ties to urban culture give it a street credibility that others sorely lack. It is no wonder that it is as popular as the Honourable Member has described. Basketball was consistently one of the most viewed events at the Olympic and Paralympics. 7,500 fans turned out to see the Newcastle Eagles, my local team, play in the BBL Cup final earlier this month. And just the other week, 17,000 people packed out the O2 Arena to watch an NBA game, which was absolutely fantastic by all accounts. Yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and also congratulate the honourable member for Chester for securing this debate. I hadn't realised we had a little bit of additional time, so I was trying to be as quick as possible with my previous intervention, which I will be again, Deputy Speaker. But I want, in context of attending basketball games, having attended a few of the Newcastle Eagles games, the honourable member, I'm sure, will share my enthusiasm for actually attending the games and the amazing family-friendly atmosphere that there is at these games, and really everybody should experience it because it's quite something to behold.
Yeah. That's an excellent point, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm sure other members who are here supporting basketball tonight will agree with my honourable friend. I know I was at one of the matches she attended, and she had a sort of toddler and very young sort of 5-year-old child with her, and they were running around thoroughly enjoying the game in a very, very safe environment. I think anyone who goes to basketball for the first time falls in love with it. It is so exciting, so fast-paced, and I played it at school. I know my demeanour may not now give you the appearance of an elite basketball player, but in my youth I was never elite, but I did play the sport with some enthusiasm and have loved it ever since. It is very exciting to play and to watch. I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and again the member for Chester for securing this debate. And I just wanted to add my voice to those of my honourable friends to say that, having also attended matches at Newcastle Super Eagles and also at St James's Park to watch Newcastle United, what is very striking about a basketball match is the family atmosphere and how it welcomes and supports visitors of all ages, and how this is made possible in part because of the elite players, and how this needs to be supported in the Olympics, in the Rio Olympics and beyond.
Yes, basketball is a very inclusive and accessible sport, as we've heard. It is often found at the heart of some of the best community projects up and down the country, like, as we've heard tonight, the Hoops for Health programme delivered by Newcastle Eagles in my constituency and across the North East, with professional players encouraging young people to get active. They do that without any funding from Sport England, because Sport England don't actually target that age group, despite the recent observation from Baroness Campbell, who, as you know, is chair of UK Sport, that 20% of pupils aged 5 are overweight, and the statistics actually get worse as they get older. Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt her, and clearly I'll wind up at the end. Just to be absolutely clear, Sport England are not allowed to intervene that far down the process because they're tied by the lottery additionality rules. So there is no way they can invest. It would be against the law, and it would break all the lottery rules.
And I obviously thank the Minister for that clarification on that point. But because basketball is not an established sport, it tends to be, it's fair to say, at the back of the line when the funding gets divvied up, as the Honourable Member for Chester has described. In terms of the elite level, however, the House has also heard from the Honourable Member for Chester about the massive strides made by GB men and women basketball teams within just one Olympic cycle. And I share his doubts about a process that could write off their hopes for 2016 on that basis. I hope the Minister will be able to shed some light on this. I will, yes.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. She's been very generous. Just in relation to the Hoops for Health programme and the funding, which appreciate Sport England don't give funding for that age, but surely she would agree that they should give recognition for that funding and effort that is going in at that younger age, that is producing the athletes of the future that now will not have the funded sport to actually move into and become those elite players.
And I think that is the key point, Mr Deputy Speaker, that I'm going to move into. The London Olympics promised that we would inspire a generation, but which part of that generation are we going to inspire? This question matters because how we distribute money, whoever's distributing it under whichever rules, how we distribute that money for sport says a lot about what sort of society we want to be. UK sports no compromise policy inadvertently and yet knowingly punishes team sports for being accessible, as they are therefore more globally competitive. I know the Minister is, if you hear my point out, because they're more globally competitive, therefore Team GB has lower medal hopes. So I applaud the success of sports such as rowing and sailing and equestrian. Obviously, we all do. But we need to find a balance between rewarding easier success on a global level and taking into consideration the wider societal positives that accessible team sports, such as basketball, provides to our local communities.
I'm terribly sorry. I can't let her get away with saying that it is easier to win a gold medal at rowing or sailing than it is at basketball. You did definitely say we cannot fund sports where it is easier to get a medal. If you have seen the sheer exertion that young men and women go through to win a rowing gold medal, it is. You know, that they're up at 6 o'clock every morning, day in, day out. I absolutely appreciate the concern that the Honourable Lady is saying, but please, it is unfair to run down other sports on the back of it. She did say that.
I think we are in danger, actually, of going off where we're meant to be. This is purely about funding for basketball. I understand there's going to be examples, but I think we're taking the example a little bit out of where we should be. Hopefully, and I'm quite sure, that the Honourable Member is going to come right back on that subject about funding for basketball. Sharon Hodgson.
Yes, and the wider point I was making is about the global accessibility of basketball. If you're playing a sport where globally, say for instance, if I move away from, and I wasn't to cry in any sports, but say a sport such as clay pigeon shooting, there are less people who play that globally, so it may be easier in the sense of the numbers to win a medal at that sport because you are not competing with as many people because it is not as accessible. Perhaps I didn't explain it correctly.
Maybe I could be helpful and say we're not comparing like with like, and I think that's the danger where we're going. So I want to get back onto where we are, and let's get back to where we should be. Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you ever so much, Mr Speaker, and I think that did certainly make the point that I was trying to make. Thank you for that. It may be a difficult task to get a medal in Rio, and I admit that. But when you look at how far basketball has come in just 6 years, it is by no means impossible. But more importantly, how much will not having at least a decent showing in Rio further damage a sport that is also suffering from cutbacks in grassroots and talent funding? All we're looking for is fairness, Mr Deputy Speaker. Fairness for the young boy or girl in Sunderland, Newcastle, Merseyside, Leicester, Chester, Plymouth, etc., who loves basketball because it is of the cities, it's of the streets, it's cool, it's urban. They idolise basketball superstars across the world and other countries, only for the reason because our national team isn't as prominent as it is and could be and should be. I'd like to end my remarks, Mr Deputy Speaker, by quoting Llewellyn Deng's letter to the Prime Minister, mentioned earlier by my honourable member for Chester. And if I may, and have the indulgence of the House, I'd like to read it into the record for you tonight, seeing as we've got a few minutes to spare. Dear Prime Minister, and I quote, "I'm writing to you following the news that we, as Team GB, have had our funding completely cut, which has been deeply upsetting and confusing, to say the least. My initial reaction was to try and understand why and how, if by any means I could help to change this. The UK has given so much to my family and I. The honour and pride I've felt to play for Team GB over the last 5 years has been something words really can't explain. Looking back to when we started, it's incredible how far the team has come. So many people have worked too hard for this to happen now. I truly feel like we are starting to put British basketball on the map, and we are now being taken seriously on a world stage. Taking myself and the other guys out of the equation, what about the future generation? Do not underestimate the fan base that this sport has in the UK. It's a sport that kids can relate to, and a sport that should be easily accessible when all you need is some concrete, 2 hoops and a ball. We all heard about the legacy that London 2012 was going to bring to sport in the UK, and I refuse to sit back and let that legacy be completely demolished for basketball. I, along with thousands of other people involved with the game, have put too much in and cared too greatly to let this happen." I will.
Does the Honourable Lady recognise as well, though, one of the things which is incredibly important is to make sure there is a significant amount of media interest in this. For instance, Sky Television, which has put an enormous amount of money, and I must declare an interest in that I have a brother who's a cricket commentator for Sky Television, that they end up by actually putting an enormous amount of effort and money into grassroots sport, especially amongst the youngsters, and in places like Plymouth, where I have got a brilliant cricket club, they have been doing an enormous amount of very, very good work indeed.
Sharon Hodgson.
I agree with that, and hopefully the media interest will be raised following this debate. That intervention has come right in the middle of Llewellyn Deng's letter, so I'll return to it, and it'll look rather odd in Hansford, I'm sure, but if you bear with me, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'll continue. I quote, "My UK Foundation aims to help basketball, to help people not only get into the sport, but to also help those more capable players develop their skills and achieve their goals of becoming a professional player. The sport of basketball is a pathway that teaches so many valuable lessons on and off the court. How are we supposed to motivate these kids to carry along their journey when there's now nothing at the end? No Team GB, no Olympic dream, no goal. You're allowing a sport to be greatly harmed, a sport that can bring so much to so many, and I won't accept it. The sport needs more input from other resources, I totally agree, but then let's force the sport as a whole to live up to its promises and its potential. But we need this funding in order for that to happen. As I said, I get to see firsthand what this sport can do for kids in the UK, and it's too valuable to be just chucked away. There is a petition being circulated which I've signed, and I've signed as well, Mr Deputy Speaker, and will encourage as many people as I can to do the same. I've been told about and shown examples of other letters that you and other members will have received detailing all of the facts and figures relevant to the growth of the sport, of which there are many. But I wanted you to hear firsthand from someone who came through the grassroots basketball system and from someone who knows what talent in the UK has to offer in the sport of basketball. I also want to share with you one fact that I was given when this news came out. Basketball participation for 11 to 15-year-olds is at 27%, which is second only to football. This is the time to be supporting such a statistic, not wiping it out. I have asked that this letter also be sent to everyone connected to the decision and next week's appeal with UK Sport. Again, too much has been achieved for this to happen. I very much look forward to hearing your thoughts. Kind regards, Llewellyn Deng. Quite a powerful letter from an internationally world-famous sportsman. I hope the Minister can give us and give everyone involved in Great Britain, involved in basketball, that Olympic dream back. Thank you.
Sir Bob Russell.
Mr Deputy Speaker, very briefly, I'd like to put on record my appreciation to my constituents, Mr John Lloyd and his son, Mr Mark Lloyd, who over the years, both nationally and locally, have contributed to the development and growth and success of basketball. And on their behalf, I hope that we will be able to continue that. I think one of the great delights of the last year's Olympics was the breadth of sports where Britain won medals. And we were winning medals in sports which only a few Olympics back, Britain's participants did their best, but never came within a whisker of winning a medal. And I think that is a credit to the Olympic movement in this country that breadth of sports have developed. I just finish, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the point where I intervened on the honourable gentleman, my friend, the city of Chester, because to my mind, Olympic legacy is the participation of as many young people as possible. And we all know, particularly in urban communities, that basketball, with a court set up in the corner of a playing field, or whether it's the full pitch, does attract youngsters in numbers. And if there are internationals and national figures that they can look up to and aspire to, then I think that pyramid of participation will widen, and the wider the base of the sporting pyramid, whatever that sport is, the better chance there is that you'll get the pinnacle of the elite athlete coming through. And therefore I think the withdrawal of funding is short-sighted. We've only got to look at the record of the London Olympics and look back 5, 6, 7 Olympics to see how far British sports across the spectrum have dramatically increased, and that's the funding to a large extent, it's the enthusiasm of the various sporting organisations, and I hope it will be possible for those responsible for funding basketball to realise that mass participation is part of that Olympic legacy for our young people.
George Howarth.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I begin by congratulating the honourable gentleman for the City of Chester for initiating this debate. It is both timely and important in terms of basketball in this country. Secondly, Mr Deputy Speaker, I should declare several interests, none of which are remunerated. First of all, I am a trustee of the British Basketball Foundation, which the honourable member, the member for City of Chester, chairs. Secondly, I'm a member of the All-Party Group, which my honourable friend, the member for Washington and Sunderland West, chairs. Thirdly, I'm a supporter of the Mersey Tigers, which 2 seasons ago was a great thing to do, since they won every bit of silverware in sight. Sadly, since then, mainly as a result of financial difficulties, they've been less successful. And last but by no means least, because my grandson Luke plays for his school at basketball and also for a non-school side in the area. He played, in fact, earlier this evening. Unfortunately, I have no idea what the outcome of the game was, because he hasn't sent me a text. So I do have a number of reasons to support basketball, both personal and to do with the sport, that the involvement I have in various bodies involved with this sport. I want to just make 3 remarks, and I'll try to be brief, Mr Deputy Speaker. The first is a general point that has been made by several honourable friends, and indeed the honourable gentleman. And that is about the impact the sport can have on specific communities. The first thing that needs to be said is it is a very inclusive sport. You don't have to have a lot of expensive equipment. You don't have to be associated with a club that might have difficult requirements to fulfil to become a member of it. And it doesn't require any great massive support. It does require support, but it doesn't require massive support at grassroots level. The second point about it is, and again it's been made, that in fact young participants, male and female, are gain great health benefits from being involved. It doesn't matter at what level. And, you know, a number of health authorities of one kind or another have recognised that and have supported some of the clubs who are more successful in building up that grassroots level of support. And the final general point I want to make is that if we are to be successful in basketball nationally and internationally, then the first requirement is that that grassroots support is built up, because nothing comes from nothing, and you'll only get that level of elite sport if you've actually got youngsters from the ages of maybe 8, 9 and 10 onwards participating in the sport. We know that the model for other sports has been precisely that, and it's no different for basketball, except that it does reach parts of the community that maybe other sports don't. I say that not as a matter of my opinion as a Member of Parliament or a grandfather who has an involvement in the sport, but if you look at Mr Deputy Speaker, at the clubs that are successful, specifically Leicester and Newcastle, but also the Cheshire Jets, the thing that sustains them is the activity that's taking place at grassroots level, particularly amongst young people. So that's hugely important, and I'm sure, I will give way to the Honourable Member in a moment, but I'm sure the Minister will agree that is the successful model that we want to build. Give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
The Honourable Gentleman will probably be aware of the problems that Cheshire Jets had and the launch of a new club in November, Cheshire Phoenix, which is a real community-supported club. It's community-owned, it's community-based, and it's a real group team effort from the entire city, from the entire county, to get the club going. Brand new club, but it's got huge aspirations, huge amount of support, and Cheshire Phoenix, the other teams have been mentioned, Cheshire Phoenix have as well.
I'm grateful. I think I did. I may inadvertently have referred to them still as Jets. I was aware of the developments that had taken place, and apart from wishing the Mersey Tigers well, I do hope the Cheshire Phoenix does well as well. We come from more or less the same part of the world. And I think what the clubs that are successful demonstrate is that, you know, if you have a vibrant, successful grassroots level of support, then you can build over time a successful club, professional club, and beyond that we can build a successful national sport and perform well internationally. Which brings me on to the specific point I wanted to make about the decision. The decision based on the estimation of what the Olympic prospects are for Brazil, I think, is wrong. And I think, I don't intend to labour this point, but I think if those responsible were to revisit this subject, which I think they are hopefully doing, then they would recognise that the routes to qualifying for Brazil include European qualification, and there's a very strong chance, a demonstrably strong chance, that the UK team could do so through that route. So I think it's been underestimated what the potential for qualification is. The second issue that has been raised is the issue of governance. And I've heard the fact that this issue of governance has been raised, but I've yet to receive any kind of explanation as to why that may be the case. And so I do hope, and I'm sure he will, and the Minister and I had a brief discussion about this last week, we'll be able to hopefully find out more about what is at issue, because I think, again, this may have been a misreading of the true situation as regards the sport. Let me conclude, Mr Deputy Speaker, by saying that the Minister, I know, cares passionately about sport, and I know he's a fair-minded Minister. I also know, because he told me, he has limited powers of intervention in these matters, and I accept all of that. What I would say, though, is that he has considerable influence, and I do hope that he will use the influence he has to question some of the basis on which some of these decisions have been made, and I hope that in a quiet and unassuming but effective way he will be able to encourage those responsible to reconsider this decision as a matter of urgency.
Minister.
Wonderful. Mr Deputy Speaker, thank you. Could I start by congratulating the Honourable Member for Chester for securing this debate and for the manner in which he presented his case. This is actually going to be the third thing I was going to say, but it's probably worth saying now. I will proceed with a certain amount of caution on this tonight. The appeal is due in front of the UK Sport Board, I believe, on Wednesday. That, in any event, is not the end of the process. There are a number of further hurdles over which they could progress. If they have got the terms of that appeal right, and many of the points that have been made tonight, I suspect, will form part of that appeal, then it strikes me that they will have a case that is going to provoke some further thought, and let me put it no further than that. But we do have this debate. I'll just make this one. We do have this debate tonight at a slightly delicate moment. Just a couple of other things I'd like to say that sort of frame my remarks this evening before I answer some of the individual points. The first is that it is important, and I hope honourable members will forgive me for making this point, but it is important to frame this against the fact that this system works. Our elite performance system in this country is the envy of almost every other Olympic system in the world. Back in Sydney, we were 10th in the medal table with 28 medals. Here we are in London 12 years later, 3rd with 65. The Australians would kill for this sort of system, as would many, many others. And people are here in this country looking at how we've done it, trying to work out the processes that we've adopted. And indeed, I know, talking to many of the Australians, they feel they will have to be much tougher and come far closer to our no-compromise approach if they are to catch up some of the ground that they feel that they have lost. And I was talking to a forum of performance directors this morning, and knowing I had this debate, I said, let me just road test this on you. Have we got this right? Have we gone too far? And do we need, in fact, to crank it back? And they said absolutely not. They felt that the funding awards this year, the way it had been done this year, was the fairest and most robust method that they had been put through. And these are performance directors who've done this for a number of years. And they had nothing but praise for the way that they had been guided through the system by UK Sport and the results that had been reached at the end. So whatever ones, I absolutely understand the passion expressed about a sport that many members care about deeply, but do just balance it with the fact that this is a performance system that has just, for a country our size, has just produced 65 medals and a 3rd place in the medal table. That is an extraordinary success by anybody's standards. A couple of other points very quickly. The Honourable Member for Knowsley is absolutely correct. I can set the overall strategy for UK sport, and indeed I do. It is not up to me to make individual funding decisions within that, because there is much of about 2/3 of the money that goes to any of these funding awards is lottery money, and as anybody who's been in this House for any length of time will know, that is not ministers to direct. And the final point I would make is that funding, though I would wish it to be otherwise, in this area is not inexhaustible. We have done very well to increase the overall budget for Olympic and Paralympic sport by 11%, the only host nation that has ever done that for the Rio cycle. But that does not mean that we don't have to take tough decisions, and this has been one of them. And I know, having been through the decision-making process with UK Sport, they took me through it, and I had them and Sport England in, so we could look at both funding settlements together, that they have a chart, and the question is at which point you slice the thing off up and down the funding pile, and that is done on the basis for UK sport on the basis of medal success in Rio. Let me run through the various issues raised by my honourable friend. He asked me whether I met with UK Sport and indeed Sport England. I do so every month, is the short answer. I see both chief executives every month, and I spent close to 3 hours with both organisations going through both these two funding awards. As far as the UK Sport decision was concerned, they made that decision. I entirely take on board what the honourable member has said, on the basis that basketball itself had failed to demonstrate that it had a realistic chance of qualifying for Rio 2016, or that it had medal potential for 2020. And it is worth saying, you know, they have come a long way, but the fact remains that of the 10 games they contested at the London Olympics, men and women, they did only win one. Which is not a great performance record, I have to say, for all the fact they may be on a fast improving pathway. How are these decisions made? GB Basketball themselves put a submission forward that goes to UK Sport. It is then considered by a performance panel with independents on it. They go through each and every aspect of it. As I say, other performance directors that I was talking to today said this was the best iteration that they had been through in a number of these cycles. It is an incredibly detailed process that looks not only at their medal potential for Rio, but also their medal potential for 2020. And indeed, in Rio, the line was drawn at a point where they needed to medal, which may explain the slight discrepancy between whether they'll qualify or not. The issue over the governance structure, I think the easiest thing might be if I wrote to the honourable gentleman and tried to and nail this down exactly for him. There has been, basketball has been I've been involved in sport now as a politician since 2004 when we were in opposition, and all through that time, basketball, if I'm allowed to put it this way, has been a bit of a frustration, because it is a sport with such enormous and obvious potential, and so many of the contributions tonight have acknowledged that. It is a sport that has the ability to reach into communities in a way that some other sports are unable to do, and yet it somehow fails constantly just to catch a light. And there is, sometimes people think that's because the performance figure, the active people survey doesn't pick it up. The sort of people who play basketball don't always respond to the survey, so it's not, so therefore the participation levels are getting underplayed. I've heard that said. I think there have been in the past some weaknesses in the structure of the way that the sport has been delivered. A sport like netball, which somebody mentioned, I'm looking for a nod now, who put netball in the frame, or whoever did put netball in the frame. Netball is a fantastic example of a sport that from pretty difficult beginnings has managed to increase its participation base extraordinarily. I've visited schemes that they run for school-gate mothers in places like Leicester, where they've adjusted the whole way they run their sport to try and get more young women in particular back into it. And as a result of it, they have been rewarded with a very considerable increase in their funding. So this can be done, but I will tie down exactly what the governance issues are. And I suppose that all leads on to the key question in this, which is, what does basketball need to do? I haven't yet met him, but I'm told, or had any communication with him, but I'm told the basketball has just got a very good new independent chairman. I think what impresses people least at this stage is a huge amount of fuss and bother. I think the best thing he could do would be to take a really long, hard, clinical look at the sport of basketball, and I hope that many of the members who've shown enthusiasm for this here tonight and are involved with this would play a part in it. Take a really hard-nosed look at what needs to be done. Go and look at team sports that have tackled this successfully. Go and look at how cycling have put 500,000 people on their performance base. Go and look at how netball, a team sport, have done this. There's got to be some transferable lessons from netball to basketball. We have enormous performance-based expertise in this country. That's what's driven us from 10th in the medal table to 3rd. Make use of those experts in academia, in UK sport, and really turn this sport inside out. And then I will give you the hope in all of this. For all the fact that these funding decisions, the initial funding decisions, have been made and announced, there is an appeal process through which they can go and are going at the moment. And if they present the right sort of case, they will have a perfectly good chance of securing funding. But also, this is not the end of the story. And if they start to perform and show that they are likely to qualify and are in with a chance of a medal in 16 or 20 or wherever 20 turns out to be after the IOC decision this summer, then there will be the opportunity to fund them. And I just leave with the House the story of gymnastics. I've seen people from the sport recently. They had their funding cut after a disastrous Olympics in Athens where they basically washed out. They had their funding almost completely cut. Different sort of sport, but not a wholly different position. They went back and had a really long dig out of the sport to work out what was required to ensure that these young athletes that we all see in gyms in our constituencies up and down the land could turn into Olympic medal winners in the future. They turned the sport inside out, put a really tough performance-based culture in place, and the result of that was very plain to see in London, where they were not only one of the great successes, but probably arguably one of the most unexpected successes. So this can be done. And I would simply finish by saying, I don't know if there's anything else that... I was just going to address the social point. I take the point about basketball, absolutely take the point about basketball's social reach, but it's not as if we're just funding sports that have a reach elsewhere. Sports like athletics, cycling, boxing in particular, one of the great successes of London 2012, has huge reach into deprived communities in the inner cities. So the UK sport, if I could reassure members of one thing, they do make these decisions on performance basis. Yeah, on performance basis.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. I would simply make the point, having been involved, not as a participant, in amateur boxing over many years in my own constituency, that the difference between amateur boxing and basketball, because in many ways the comparison he makes is a good one, is that most local clubs are long established and have got a long tradition to draw on, where basketball is in the process of getting there, not there yet.
No, it's a fair point, and I suspect in many ways backs up the point I was making earlier on about the need to have a long, hard look at this structure and get it absolutely right. Let me just finish by saying this, and I should probably say I hope the honourable member's grandson won his game. I hope he'll give him all our best wishes if he's done so. Let me just finish by saying this. I absolutely, I really want to sort of finish, I suppose, where I started, actually, by thanking the honourable member for bringing this debate before the House and congratulating him for the way that he did it, and in fact, congratulating all the honourable members who've taken part for their comments. I absolutely, as the Minister responsible for this, I want sport in this country to be successful. And I absolutely want basketball to be as successful as rowing or cycling or sailing or any of the obviously more successful Olympic sports. It has had this sort of, however said troubled past, that's probably overdoing it, but it has been a source of great frustration to I think all of us involved in the sport that it hasn't just taken off. It occurs to me there may be a moment of opportunity here with a new chairman, if he's really prepared to sort of take this on, sort the governance of the sport out, make sure they have people who understand properly how to do the participation piece and the performance expertise that really drives success at the top end. I'm sure that if he can take that case to UK sport and prove that indeed we do have a chance of meddling in basketball in Rio or in the 2020 Games, or a good chance of doing so, then they will look again at this decision.
The question is, this House must now adjourn. Does many other opinions say aye? Aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.
House of Commons sound.